Father-in-law feels owed time with grandchildren. My father-in-law lives in our town, and for the past few years, since my husband and I moved here and had children, we've seen him regularly, at least weekly, and allowed him to be a part of many family events, Christmas morning, trick-or-treating, etc. The problem is, I can't stand him, and I think recently the fact that he's a perpetual part of my life is getting to me. My husband and I talk about this at length and really don't know how to handle it, as he is constantly applying pressure to see us, and when he doesn't hear from us even for a few days makes us stink. I'd love to know what those who have local grandparents and parents have in terms of expectations for time spent. Now for details. Apologies, it was impossible to be concise. Off the bat, important to share that undoubtedly my F34 father-in-law, 78, is a textbook narcissist, undiagnosed, as the worst ones are. He was a terrible husband, verbally, emotionally, and perhaps physically abused my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who is 10 years older than my husband. He really messed up my BIL, who at 44 is also a huge narcissist with depression and other mental health challenges, and he cheated on my mother-in-law when my husband was 8. Because they divorced after that, my husband miraculously ended up really unscathed and had a great childhood and fine relations with his dad, likely due to his mother shielding him and playing the role of primary caregiver. In fact, FIL somehow managed to remain a part of everyone's lives, having some custody of my husband. BIL was an adult by the time of the split, combining holidays with my MIL and her new husband, and just generally being around. When I first met my husband, FIL was in a new relationship with a woman who was wonderful. This was after 3 failed marriages, my MIL being his third, and a long-term partnership, minus 18 years. When you first meet him, he seems like a character more than anything, very grandiose, clearly thinks he's charming and full of anecdotes. Anyone who gets to know him, however, finds that the anecdotes are the same, and tired, and he can actually be quite rude, domineering of conversations, selfish, and stingy. His girlfriend broke up with him after 8 years, which at first seemed like a shock to us, but quickly was not all that surprising, given how much better she was than him. She explained the breakup to him well, that for all his good qualities, she simply couldn't handle his bad ones anymore, in particular how he acts in public. See, rudeness, stinginess, extra pompous behavior. The breakup devastated him, and while he initially seemed to reflect on the feedback she gave, it quickly became her fault for the split, and he, being entirely alone in his life, became increasingly needy and more present in our lives than I had ever known him to be. We had just had our first child and thick in the throes of newborn life, weren't able to offer him as much company as my BIL was able to, although I will note, he still was seeing us for an hour or so weekly. He became increasingly codependent with my BIL, spending many evenings at his house late into the night, attending parties my BIL hosted, and even vacationing with my BIL and family. Now BIL also can get irritated at his dad, and their relationship is a constant roller coaster of fighting or being attached at the hip. I'm sure there were complex psychological reasons for why BIL was so supportive of him, but DH and I later realized that his motivation was at least partially financial. We realized this when we found out that our FIL bought a vacation home in an area BIL loves and put BIL's name on the deed. Now that situation could be an entirely different post, but very quickly, a fight ensued. BIL cut off all contact with FIL. They sold the house, and 2 years later still have not spoken. This fallout then left FIL with no one, except for us. We tried to keep the same cadence of visits with him that we always had, weekly or so, dinners or quick visits with our children. However, driven largely by the fact that he really is alone, the requests to see us have done nothing but increase. Our ability to tolerate him waxes and wanes over time. So over the course of the last years, we have had times that we've been more amenable to seeing him than not. Important to note my use of the word tolerate, because at best, when we spend time with him it's fine, at worst, it's painstaking. It's also important for me to share the ways he is guilting us to see him. First is the explicit shameless guilt, haven't heard from you in a while, or I'm not getting any younger, or I won't be around forever so I need to spend time with my granddaughters. He is not shy to tell us what we should be doing in terms of involving him. Second, is trying to buy us and make us feel indebted through thinly veiled offers to help. This is where I struggle the most. Years ago, he gifted us a large sum of money, which we've kept in savings, that he explained was to make us even with my BIL, who he had lent the same amount of money to years prior and never received repayment or mention of repayment for. FIL said that in doing so, he wouldn't have any worries of inequity at the time of his death when his will was being executed. I wasn't super comfortable taking the money, but knowing it was to equalize with the BIL helped. Additionally, my FIL has given us some significant gifts. He's paid to install a safety fence around our pool. I justified this as something for my daughters, and gave us a new washer-dryer as a Christmas gift. I didn't really want either of these gifts to happen because I felt they wouldn't be guilt-free and because we were able to pay for them ourselves. But FIL practically begged as he wanted to contribute as we had just moved into a new house. Additionally, my own parents had contributed similarly to our home as well again. Another way I justified. Since his offers to pay for things for us have not ceased. But my husband and I have agreed we will not accept anything from him again to avoid feeling associated guilt. It's obvious that his offers are a way to have control. In fact, following his fallout with BIL, he quickly removed BIL from his will, instead bequeathing his share to a local animal shelter. He did this, as he explained to us, because he knew if he left it all to my husband we would feel compelled to share it with my BIL. Third and finally, he guilt-trips us by constantly comparing what he gets to what my parents get in terms of time with us and my daughters. My parents are also local, much younger, 60, still working, have a house with nursery and kids' toys and treats, and are equipped to care for our children. We see them every week or 2 weeks, but in general have more meaningful time with them too. We vacation with them, and they are the backup caretakers for our daughters, keeping them for nights or weekends when we are away, or being backup care on snow days or sick days. He is constantly whining about not having time, as compared to them. And while we could explain all of the reasons that logistically my parents get more time with us and the girls, ultimately we prefer them because they are normal, loving, and supportive no-strings-attached parents who on top of it all are people we enjoy being around. And of course I'm biased to my own family, but my husband fully agrees. So all of this huge context aside, I am really struggling on how to handle him. We've been living in a cycle of excuses on putting off seeing him, and then seeing him when we have to throw him a bone, only to be guilt about it not being enough. Despite his terrible past, he's never explicitly done anything wrong to us, nor is there any tangible evidence I can point to explaining why I don't want him around. He obviously doesn't take feedback either, so a rationale discussion about his behavior is off the table, and he is not a normal person who reads the room so won't get a clue and back off. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My entitled mom wants me to pay my creep stepbrother's student debt. I, 29F, have an older stepbrother, Chris, 42M, who has been a nightmare since the day my mom married his dad. Let me give a bit of background. Our parents married when I was 4 and he was 17. Both our parents were widowed. After their wedding, we moved to the U.S. since my mom had American citizenship through marriage. I was born in the U.S. too, but after my dad died when I was 1, my mom and I moved back to Colombia. Stepdad got his residency through marriage and my stepbrother because he was a minor. My stepbrother wasn't a big fan of me. My only memories of him are just constant bullying. He would be left in charge of me since he was studying locally and lived with my parents, but mostly his babysitting really meant things like locking me in the guest bathroom or the shed outside. He would steal my lunchbox whenever he was the one who dropped me off at school. He even began to harm my pets. I have an old cat that has been with me for almost 22 years. He tried more than once to run her over with his car. My parents never believed any of it. He's the classic golden child. My mom absolutely wanted a son instead of a daughter, so my stepbrother took priority over me. The bullying just kept getting worse and creepier. He had this long key for the bathroom. The door was designed in case it got locked by accident. One could open them by inserting a long stick or key through a small hole on the outside. He would use it to walk in on me showering. My underwear would disappear sometimes, and I know for a fact it was him. He also started taking pictures of me sleeping. One night I woke up to him taking care of himself next to me while I slept. I yelled obviously. My parents came over, but he wasn't in trouble. I was tempting him. I was 14 when this happened. He was 27. No one helped me and he got bolder until he did something I am still in therapy for when I was 16. It got to a point where I called my biological half-older brother Sam, 48M and son of my biological father's first wife, to see if I could live with him and his wife, Sandy, during my last 2 years of high school. When Sam found out what was going on, he confronted my mom. My mom didn't care and just told him to take me so long he never asked her for money. Done and done. My brother and his wife became my legal guardians and took me in with my cat and the old family dog since I didn't trust leaving any living creature with Chris around. My parents never checked on me. My extended family from my father's side knew what happened, and they immediately got together to ensure I could finish school well and go to college. I don't know my maternal family at all. Thanks to my paternal family, including Sam's mother and her family, I got my bachelor's and master's, no student debt, and work as a nurse practitioner. I still live with Sam, his wife, and their 2 kids, and I pay a small rent. Neither Sam nor his wife expected me to pay anything, but that's the least I can do for the 2 people who have taken care of me for 13 years. For anyone wondering why I didn't move, it's incredibly expensive where I live, and Sam insisted I stay with them until I save enough to buy my own home. Things seemed okay until my mom messaged me recently. She had not messaged me since I was 18 when she told me she no longer had any responsibility to me. In this message, she sounded overly friendly, telling me how she missed me and asking how I was doing. I was a bit creeped out but decided to be nice, telling her about what I had done since leaving her care. She seemed very interested since apparently she knew I was a nurse, but not what kind I was. She began asking me about my salary. I didn't tell her anything about it, but that it was enough to pay the bills. My mom then began texting about Chris and how he was barely making any money due to his student debt. Apparently, Chris never finished a degree, jumping from career to career. He is now working in my stepdad's used cars business as a salesman, but most of his pay went to pay the substantial student debt he got over the year. I told my mom how sorry I was that Chris was having a hard time and wished him luck. That's when my mom finally got to what she wanted. She texted me I needed to pay his student debt so he could finally begin to make the money he deserves like the man of the family. I just turned off my phone. When I got home, Sam was surprised since I was usually the last to arrive. Sandy wasn't home yet. I told Sam what happened and showed him my mom's text messages. I don't think I've seen Sam this angry ever. He told me to block my mom, stepdad, and Chris if I had not done so yet. After talking with Sam and Sandy, I called my boss to ask the next day and the one after off. This gave me a 4-day weekend, including the days I'm normally off shift. My boss was more than okay with this and told me to just take it easy and let her know if she could help. This backfired because the next day my mom and Chris decided to come to Sam's house to speak to me. I was alone since Sam and Sandy were at work, and the kids were at school. I immediately called Sam and told him what was going on. He told me not to open the door and that he was on his way. My mom spent the whole time screaming that I owed them for raising me and that my sweet brother deserved the money. Chris was going around trying to find a window or door unlocked. There wasn't any since the windows have safety bars, and the only other door is in the closed garage and one in the yard. The yard one was locked, and just in case, I locked the one in the garage. I won't post what he called me when he saw me from one of the windows, but basically, he pretty much told me they should have thrown me away when I was a baby since I grew to be a bee. He pounded in one of the windows so hard. He actually cracked the glass. Eventually, he gave up and went back to the front door, clearly trying to kick it down. I didn't have anything to worry about. The door was a security door, but I was still very scared. Between yelling, threatening, pleading, and insults, I finally heard Sam screaming to them to get lost. I only saw things from the window. Sam pretty much dragged them both off the porch. They got to a point I couldn't hear, but I saw my mom and Chris pale and look scared before they pretty much ran to their car and drove off way past the legal speed limit. Sam came in a bit after, and immediately went full overprotective brother mode, asking me if I was okay. He kept saying sorry and hugging me. Sandy arrived almost immediately after, and she looked like she was about to commit a felony. Apparently, Sam threatened him with filing charges for what he did to me when I was 16. My brother's ace. My stepdad was willing to testify against his own son. That seemed enough to get Chris off our backs, but not my mom. Since then, it's been 3 days, and my mom has sent texts, called nonstop with various numbers, and rallied a group of people who are supposedly my maternal family to harass me for money. She claims that money should legally be hers since she's my mother, that it's my late father's missed child support. Sam is helping me find a lawyer to get a restraining order on my mom, and I plan to take my stepdad's offer to testify by pressing charges against Chris. I can't say I can forgive him for not stopping his son, but I appreciate he's at least trying. I don't know the details, but Chris did something to a relative of his dad, and since then they had a really bad fallout. I took my boss offer and will be on vacation for a few more days. But here it is. My vacation days are getting eaten up, and my therapist might need a therapist after. Thankfully, my dark sense of humor and supportive paternal family are keeping me somewhat sane.